Hello and welcome to the final presentation of the Dell Technologies Advancing Sustainability Game Design Challenge. Tonight, we have Creating a Career in the Gaming Industry. Now that participants have experienced creating a game, tonight's panel will give them invaluable insight into what careers are available in the gaming industry and how they can begin working towards the career of their dreams. We'll be starting this panel with pre-submitted questions, and then we'll be opening up the floor to audience questions later in the panel. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. I want to start with a huge thank you to the ESA Foundation for being an amazing sponsor of the Game Design Challenge and also of tonight's panel. So to kick us off, I'd like to introduce Anastasia Staten, the Executive Director of the ESA Foundation.
Thanks, Lindsay. I appreciate that. As Lindsay said, my name is Anastasia, and I'm the Executive Director of the ESA Foundation. And I think that I have one of the coolest jobs in the industry. I'm sure others on this call might claim the same, but since I get to go first, I get to claim it. But my role in the industry is actually to represent the philanthropic arm of all the major companies. And one of the really cool things that we get to do is work with a lot of students, just like you all, but also we have a scholarship program for women and minority students who are interested in video game arts and sciences. And whether you are here joining us today because your teacher or your parent told you to, or simply you think that you want to be a game designer later on in life, or maybe you are a cool parent or teacher who wants to learn more, I guarantee we're all going to have fun and we're going to learn something. In my role, I get the opportunity to chat with a lot of students, especially your age. And I oftentimes ask, especially when we're not in this virtual world, who loves video games? And I think without fail, I usually get a room full of shouts and excitement. But when you ask people if they want to make video games, they sometimes hesitate. And most of that hesitation is because they don't understand all the cool opportunities that exist in the video game industry and the very different paths that you can take to joining the industry. Yes, there are a lot of jobs that are in the STEAM space, like designers and artists and engineers and technicians, like a lot of the folks you'll meet today. But there's also so much more. There are art historians, there are people in marketing, there are lawyers. And so I guarantee you, if you love video games and you love to make them, obviously there's jobs for you. But also if you love video games, but also have other career interests, there's also opportunities for you as well. So I hope today with this panel of amazing individuals who are either a scholarship judge for our scholarship fund, or 3 individuals on the call today have actually been ESA Foundation Scholars as well. I hope you enjoy the panel. Make sure to ask lots of questions and learn more about these amazing folks and their craft. And congratulations on finishing your challenge in 2 days. I look forward to seeing all the designs. Have a great panel, everyone.
Thanks, Anastasia. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves so they can talk about their journey in the video game industry and how they ended up here with us today. So Darcy, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, my name is Darcy. I'm a rising junior at NYU Game Center, and I'm also a current ESA scholar.
Awesome, thank you. Angel, we'll move on to you.
Hi, my name is Angel. I work as a senior technical mocap animator at 343 Industries, and I'm developing the new Halo Infinite game, which I'm really excited about. And so basically my role mixes art and engineering together.
That's awesome. What a cool role. Andrew?
Hello, I am Andrew. I was a former ESA scholar for 2 years. I am currently working at Treyarch as a gameplay programmer on Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. I have a big interest in game AI, and I'm excited to talk to you all.
Awesome, thanks. And last but not least, Adrian.
Hello, I'm Adrian Lara. I'm a senior designer at Activision. I started in 2009 or so. I've ranged from different disciplines of a programmer on Guitar Hero to character designer in Skylanders, level designer on Spyro and Crash Bandicoot. I also am the co-chair of our company's LGBT plus and employees network. LGBT plus and allies employee network. And what we do is also make sure that we have inclusion and representation as part of a priority. I'm also quite passionate about accessibility in games and making sure that accessibility and inclusion is a way that we can make sure that everyone can enjoy our games.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. So we're going to kick it off with kind of a broad question. But when did you know you first wanted to pursue a career in video games? And Darcy, I'll hand this one off to you since you're still in school. So you are probably the closest to finding that first moment.
Sure. I actually joined an after-school program. It was fairly small, like in around my 10th grade year in high school. And one of our first ever projects was to just create like a projectile, something that shoots across the screen. And I chose to make like Wario shoot out like hot dogs. And that was like my first ever project. And I remember running home and being like, I got to make this better. How can I make this fancier? What can I do to program this and make it way bigger than I could imagine? So that was definitely that moment, me wanting to go back home and rush and iterate on that game and make it, I guess, compared to what I do now, not that gargantuan, but like it's still really big for me starting out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I want to add that I first started at around 5th grade. So throughout middle school, I would prototype small games here and there and find other friends in my middle school who would also want to work on the same game together. And so that experience really embellished my love for video games.
Did you want to go, Adrian?
Sorry, fighting with the mute button. Which is right next to the end, the leave call button. Great design.
It is.
For me, I remember in high school, I was playing Final Fantasy VII. And there was a moment when something very sad happens to a character. And I remember feeling surprised that such emotions can come from video games. Like, this was a digital person, and like I'm seeing a cutscene, which now looks kind of very laughable in terms of quality and the age. But like at the time, it reminded me that like this is a technology and an experience that is from a video game. Like this is something at the time that I think we'd only expect from movies, cinematics, novels. And I thought that, wow, how do they do this? What is the other side like from the CD or the cartridge? And it was something I wanted to investigate, because if something as amazing and as much as a cultural impact like games had existed back then, it made such an impact to me as a kid. What would they be like in the future? And that to me was kind of like my first like, yes, let's do this. I think I want to do this, but how is the next question.
So for me, I had a little bit of a different journey. My brother and I were big gamers. He got me into video games, and we loved playing together. We actually often fought over the controller a lot, but we ended up playing all night, playing like Super Mario Brothers, Zelda, Resident Evil, Mortal Kombat, EverQuest, you name it. So in high school, my brother had passed away, and it was actually his dream to work in video games as well as become a programmer. So I really was determined to make both of our dreams come true, and I made a promise to fulfill our dreams. And that's how I got to where I am today.
That's awesome. So it sounds like all of you have had a few key moments that have really shaped your decision to go into the industry and to make video games. So now that you've all are in the industry, what is one of your favorite parts of working in the gaming industry, and what is one of the most challenging parts?
You will work with the most talented individuals ever, most intelligent and inspiring. Some of these people will become friends for life. I have friends all over the United States, the UK, you name it, like the entire world. So it's really great to have that support and that network.
Absolutely.
For me, I think your mileage can vary, but the community of people who I make it for are really appreciative of a lot of the details in the games you put out. So that can be friends and family, or on a bigger scale, streamers for Call of Duty. Because we're working on a live game, I get to see the reactions quite often. So I really appreciate that.
For me, it's like it's gonna sound shallow, but it's like, oh cool, I had a Spyro T-shirt. They walk into the grocery store and they're like, "Hey, did you know they're gonna make a remaster of that game?" Like, yeah, I know. But like more broadly, the experience there is that gaming might seem or feel niche or like just an aspect, like a very tiny aspect of people's lives. But I think the reality is that gaming is a social connection for people, and for people of all kind of backgrounds, disciplines, abilities, genders, identities, what have you. And that to me is like a really good binding aspect of the human experience. And to me, like, that sounds really broad and flowery, but at the same time, I think it's real. We are connected by this space, this virtual space of just having fun and wanting to have a good time, or maybe sometimes just being terrified or like feeling like a superhero. Any of these things. These are things that we can do in games and things that we can make for us.
Yeah, definitely. That was so beautiful and well put. Of like, games are really this kind of universal language. You can really communicate with others depending on like what kind of games you like, or just playing the game together. Like that in itself is very wonderful and amazing about the industry. I guess as a student who makes games, one thing that I really like I would compare game designing to like playing a Professor Layton game in a way where you're kind of problem solving creatively. And I think that's something that's really fun to me personally, because it's like playing with your like brain in a way, using it in an interesting way.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like all of you guys really love working in the gaming industry, which is awesome. And so what kind of advice would you give a student who's interested in a career in the video games industry?
I can probably answer that a little bit. Remembering that you always have a voice. People want to hear your voice in the gaming industry. I feel like games have changed over, the couple decades that we've been making them. So make sure that, you speak up in those meetings, or, really shape those games.
Something I tell others a lot is that your first few games probably won't be that successful. So it's better to, get them out and show them to people first and early on. So creating smaller games or games that you're passionate about, but that you can finish. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice.
I think one of the advice that I would give would be to kind of help to create that connection with whomever you are talking to, whomever you're collaborating with, by meeting them where they're at. When it comes to game design in general, it can be really difficult to describe like the end experience of what we're trying to do while trying to build the bridge towards that experience. So helping to understand, like, we may all have very different perspectives on where to move forward or what to do next, how to communicate, what is the most important thing. But I think the end goal is always going to be very common, and helping to find that common ground allows people to really move forward with getting those ideas to the table, whether it's something as simple as like, okay, yeah, what's the name of this level? Or maybe something as complex as how do we include fair and authentic representation of our characters? All of these things, I think, are ways that we collaborate together to make more effective and more impactful for everyone.
Yeah, just to add on to Adrian, make sure that you're understanding people and understanding their intent. Look to understand, and be humble too. Hear other people's perspectives and their voice.
Definitely. I currently work with middle school and high school students, teaching them in that same after-school program that I mentioned earlier, to develop their own games throughout like an academic school year. And one thing that I hear a lot from my students is that like, will I ever get into the industry? The industry is so big, like it seems so vast and large, but something that I always like to hone in on is that there is a place for you. There's no, while the industry may seem big, the industry may seem fairly big. It's like there's so much versatility in what you can do, how you can show up, whether that is in terms of marketing or designing the games themselves. Like there's no way that you'll be left out. As long as you love what you're doing, you'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point to remember. And I think that's something Anastasia touched on quite nicely, is that there's such an array of different jobs that you can have in the video game industry. And so there is something for everyone. But I think Andrew really picked on a nice point here, who's kind of talking a little bit about maybe a portfolio and building a portfolio when you're still in school. And so, if you're in the shoes of an elementary, middle school, or high school student, what skills would you suggest that they focus on developing, or, what kind of portfolios would you suggest that they build if they'd like to go into the video game industry or into college studying a game-related degree?
So I kind of want to talk about this because I've been building a portfolio, so to speak, for a while. Early on, I think it's important to speak to your own motivations and create the things that you want to create. Telling myself younger that, oh, you must create this thing because this will help you get a job would be very hard for someone like me to accomplish that. So it's more about desires and, what seems cool to you at the time. A big factor that I see shared across a lot of developers in the industry is they say words like, oh, that looks cool, or, oh, that looks really awesome. And I don't really see that very often in other tech industries. Something unique to more games, that sort of like sense of awe and inspiration. So early on, as long as you're like finishing games and showing it to people, I think you're moving forward in the right direction. And then when you're, decide to go to college, or if you don't, building a portfolio is specified more for recruiters near the end there, once you've already had those fundamentals built with the other projects, I think is a pretty good way to go.
One advice that I would have for a portfolio specifically around design is that the end product of what we see in games was the result of billions of ideas that didn't quite make it there. And it's not to say that there are ideas that didn't work out or didn't pan out. It means that there were learnings along the way that required us to maybe shift or pivot or create new innovations. So one thing I would advise for the portfolios as the students are creating them and as they're going through their journeys is to remember that everything you make has a takeaway and a lesson that you can share that is important, even if it was failure. So things can be like, well, this didn't end up feeling like the smoothest controls, for example, but I would have changed X, Y, Z, or maybe like implemented button remapping or any of these things if there were more time. And I would do that in the next project. That in itself demonstrates growth and expertise. And you know what? Imperfection means that we can learn on how to become better people. So on top of just building the portfolio and learning, like as you're going through your journeys and your projects, don't forget that sometimes the hard experiences are the ones that really demonstrate the growth that can become from what you do next.
Yeah, that is such a great point. You can learn so much even from those missteps or those failures. And diving just a little bit more into a portfolio, because obviously it's a very important part of this industry. Do you have any kind of specific recommendations on how to create or host these portfolios as you're going along?
Yeah. So I want to add a little grain of salt to specific advice. Sometimes I give specific advice, but really it expires. So, I mean, if you're in the 4th grade, it might be expired, sometime in the future. But at the moment, a good way to host a portfolio is via free game sites such as GameJolt or itch.io. They have a lot of free games on there, and you can just put them up and people will actually play them. And there's actually a pathway for monetization that's fairly easy as well, which means you can potentially get some side money. And it's a good way to host all your games onto one place for companies to look at and share them.
Yeah, I would say from the art side, there's ArtStation. If you're looking to become like an animator or a 3D modeler, you'll hear this word thrown at you a lot. Create a demo reel. And you might ask yourself, what is a demo reel? So it's essentially a video of all your entire portfolio captured in 1 to 2 minutes. So putting that on YouTube or Vimeo, I think I pronounced that right. That would actually really help employers see your work. And then, of course, sharing that on your social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, getting feedback from your portfolio so that you can start applying that feedback.
I'd say that also on top of the formats that Angel and Andrew had discussed already, I would say also be prepared to, when there's the opportunity to have an in-person interview, to bring things with you, specifically if it's a game that can be hands-on, finding the right moment to do that and then sharing it like, hey, would you like to try something that I worked on, that I contributed to? We all make very snap judgments when it comes to as we're playing games, but we get a really good feel for the work that you're all doing when we have it in our hands and start like, yes, this is cool and I get to try this. That's how the ideation process and the inspiration begins in general, but I think it's also a really powerful way to demonstrate the work that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. That is such a good point. Having that there in person, whether it's a video game or a piece of artwork, like Angel was saying, it's always great for them to really see it in person. And so we've talked a little bit about the portfolio, and that's something that students should begin working on, when they are inspired. But what other skills would you say in middle school, high school, students should start developing if they'd like to pursue STEAM or video game related?
I think getting a base structure or a foundation is super important, especially for games. You begin to really emphasize with other team members on, your future career or with other departments if you truly understand their role and their responsibilities. So getting that general base foundation is super important to understand them and what they do and what they're passionate about. So programming, art, math is super important, especially if you're doing 3D animation. So vector math, matrix math, physics. So yes, I feel like it's all important. I know those are scary terms, but.
Yeah, it's so fun when you think about how all the things you're learning in school can apply to the video game industry. Math, science, but even history and English, it all kind of ties in. And so much of what, the students are learning in school right now can definitely be applied. But I'd love to hear from some other people about some skills.
I want to add a specific note to like an engineering pathway, since I am an engineer. Going after like choosing which game engine to go after early can be a challenging question that I get asked quite a few times. So I would recommend either Unity or Unreal. And in terms of what languages, some language that would be good would be C++. It's commonly used in the industry, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. So
To add on to Andrew, Python too would be another good programming language. See, Adrian. So yeah, Python and oh my goodness, you said something that I was going to touch on. Game engines. I feel like even programming languages, once you learn one, like game engine or a programming language, you can easily apply it to the next engine or next language. So if you go into like one area, you're not really pigeonholed held into that area. So yeah.
One aspect that I ran into is like I'm engineering trained, but as I became a programmer and I thought that was really fun and interesting challenges, I became much more interested in doing design. And I started to feel like, oh no, was my background in engineering not going to be relevant if I start to look and investigate things in design? And just to echo what Angel and Andrew were saying, that it's very multifaceted in the kind of dimensions of experience when we create games. So creating a foundation of like, and I'm not saying like, oh, focus only on one thing. And I'm not saying focus on all the things. What I'm saying is broadness is also a way to make sure that you can be an expert in a specific field. The transition from engineering to design was made a lot easier by having classes like art history was probably one of my favorite ones, but even things like I took a biomedical engineering statistics class for some reason, and I thought like I'm not going to learn anything from this, but I did because it was a presentation of data. It was kind of understanding, communicating ways that we can talk about things, and it's not just like medical data that could be applied for. It could be like, what do gamers say about this, or what's the feedback on that feature? It's broad understandings of different disciplines that can help enrich everything within the game industry and how you work towards it.
Yeah, of course. I was going to talk a little bit about that. That's definitely true. Coming from an arts, like a heavy, like illustration background, like those lessons that I learned in that background really do apply now going into game design. Like no matter what your background is, there are definitely lessons that you learn that can apply to whatever you're going to be doing in the future. But in terms of some important skills that I think are also important, going to a video game related degree, I guess, is learning how to work with other people. That is definitely very important. Angel mentioned this earlier, but learning how to show up in a space where there are a lot of people around you that are equally as talented as you and, are there to kind of be creative with you, and you're working together with them for that reason. So learning how to problem solve and being considerate towards others and being willing to listen in order to move forward as a team is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Collaboration and teamwork are such foundational skills that are going to be very helpful in any industry, but definitely in the video game industry where there's such a big team that works together to produce a video game. But we've touched on it a little bit now, but just college degrees, a lot of our participants are in high school. And so as they look forward to that next step, do you recommend college for those looking to go into game development? And if so, would you suggest a game development focused degree or more of a generic degree would be better for those?
It's a complex question, which is why I think there's like hesitation to answer. Yes, I recognize that. So part of this, I would say, is that the diversity of disciplines that are required to help contribute to games also are mirrored in the diversity of backgrounds and educational experiences that led to these professionals in games or contributions in games, which I think is why it's really difficult to kind of pin down a simple answer for an otherwise very, very challenging question. I think, though, what's important is that you help to seek inside you and reconcile what is your goal? And to also recognize that sometimes that goal can change for your own reasons or reasons around you that you may not have control over. So being flexible with like what is the absolute end goal would make sense. Like when I started off, I thought I want to work on The Sims and make furniture. That's cool, and it is cool. That is not the path I ended off on, but that's not to say that I'm not happy with the path that I'm currently on. I think it's like a mix between like just the absolute allure, and it's truly alluring, the game industry, but also like how wide the topics and the kind of work and the kind of games that can be made from it. It's so big that it's hard to answer that question. But I think the best person who can answer that is the listener. They may not have, we don't have the full context to really help with that, I would say. But the listeners here, I think, are equipped to know themselves better than anyone.
So yeah, I want to add that I've thought a lot about this question, like in the past and currently, since it's a life path question and like, did I make the right decisions, sort of thing. But something to note, or I've talked to some people who've gotten in the industry without college experience, and they're happy and they've saved a lot of money and time. So good for them. But I think one of my best decisions was being able to become an intern and become into the industry through that route. The internship programs, they treat you well. You get to meet a lot of people like-minded, and you get to try out a place before you commit to it. So I interned at EA 2019, and I decided not to go with it, and I was able to go for another company that I also wanted to work at. So having that flexibility, which is usually granted to only college students, is a really big advantage. And so I would recommend college in the end. And in between game development degree or a generic degree, so I took a computer science degree for reference. But I do see a lot of my peers in the industry have game dev degrees. So when I was in computer science and at a point I was struggling to get interviews, I was kind of like, are they all going to the people with game degrees? Or like, what am I missing? In the end, it's not necessary, but it does help. With a computer science degree, you won't be doing as many games as class projects, which is a good thing and a bad thing because one, I don't really like having games forced. It's kind of like a hobby to me. Now that it's a job, it's a little bit different, but I can imagine during college, I would not be so happy to have games as class projects. And I took one game class and I did not enjoy it that much, ironically. So I think that those are some factors to consider.
I think one thing that I wanted to add is even if you graduate, I think I was in the same position as Adrian actually, where I graduated with an animation degree. I found out quickly 6 months after that animation wasn't for me. I did not like animating at all, but I liked supporting animators to do their very best work. And so after college, I learned several different skills like becoming a self-taught programmer. And so basically what I'm saying is throughout your entire career, you will always keep learning. Like you should always look to develop those skills or develop new skills. Always keep learning.
Yes, that is absolutely such a great point. Always be learning, always be open to learning, and know that there's more learning down the road, no matter where you are and what you're interested in. But whether or not someone goes to college, what is the best way to initially start to build your network within the game industry space? Maybe when you're in high school and are interested in it.
I can kind of speak to that. In the past year, due to the pandemic, I saw that a lot of companies were offering mentorship programs directly. So there is one at Google and there's one with Take-Two. So especially if it's something that you kind of want to get info on, but you don't know where to start, those are some great places to reach out to and try to get in those mentorship programs, because they're an easy way to get a bunch of your questions answered, and also meet wonderful people that are also in the industry.
I want to add on to that. Having a specific game that you want to make and then asking questions about that game is definitely a great way to get, very specific answers. And then as you're doing that, you're sort of building your game with those answers. And once you finish that game, then you've sort of evolved as a developer.
I would say if there's ever an opportunity to attend an educational conference or social session, hopefully in person at some point, I would say take advantage of that and do it. An example is the Game Developers Conference, which has an excellent range of things and events and talks, many supported by the IGDA as well. They are able to kind of help focus a lot of these efforts on like, what topics do you want to talk about? Let's have a talk about it from someone in the industry. And they're also the speakers are also very open to like, let's connect afterwards. Then you can ask questions to them directly or offline and really help not just like find the topics that you're interested in, but people in the industry who have already investigated that topic in some ways. And it helps to build that connection, not just as like, they're a human body and I have their email, but also we have a topic in similar common that we'd like to learn more about. And I think that creates a real human connection to really dive into ideas that are specific and topics that I think we or the viewers here may want to really get to become experts in or to learn more about. And it's always just such a cool thing to be able to talk about what we're doing and just know that there's someone who cares. So it's great to just really put a human aspect on those connections as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great example of how to approach, an established game developer asking for advice or mentorship. What other approaches would you guys suggest if you're looking specifically for advice or mentorship from an established game developer?
I'm going to talks like this. So I would assume that we would be giving out our contact information after this talk, and don't be afraid to reach out. We always love answering questions. We might be busy, considering like depending on where we are in the development of the game, but reach out, and if we don't respond the first time, reach out again. Don't just stop at the first non-answer. Yeah.
So some specific advice that worked for me, might not work for everyone, is going on Twitter and DMing people very politely. I would especially do it to people who say, I'd like to mentor people, people who tweet out inviting things like that, take advantage of that. But even if they don't, sending a polite DM is not going to, hurt their feelings most likely. So I was able to get a lot of good advice that way and building up my portfolio and resume. And so I like to give back, and I also do mentorship opportunities, especially at my school I graduated from, but to you also.
I could give an example about how not to reach out. So
yes, also very good.
Oh no, embarrassing story time. So this is personally me. I attended an educational talk on an MMO that I played at the time. I was a big fan of it, and during the Q&A sessions, I was just kind of like nerding out on everything, and I just realized like, oh no, I'm just talking about the work they'd done, but not like talking about the progress or like the connections that could be made or like the opportunities that I wanted to learn more about. And in many ways, like my like obsession or like nerdiness of the game was actually kind of a barrier to like making the connection of like, okay, let's talk more about the seriousness of this and like how it can move forward. Or what were the design decisions that went into it? And for me, like I think it's learning to like keep a healthy in check of my nerdiness of when I'm also trying to pursue connections and helping to build a network as well. That said, the kind of nerdiness is also that can be really infectious in a positive way, to be like, oh, cool, it's great to see a super fan of a game or a feature or something like that. So I think it's a good balance between like keeping the curve of your enthusiasm, but also be enthusiastic because like, oh yes, the people are speaking on a topic maybe you're passionate with or want to know more on. Do I regret doing that? Maybe slightly, but in many ways, it was just being authentic with the developers, and I think that's important too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Approaching these kind of conversations and connections with authenticity is just always so important to really, like you said, make those human connections. So we're going to round out the discussion with one final question. Some of you might have to think back. Darcy, you might have to think forward. But what surprised you or excited you the most about your first job in video games, job or internship?
They take a lot of effort. A lot of people that make a game, and it's very complex. I didn't realize how complex, making a game really, really is.
Absolutely. That's such a good answer.
My first job was a programmer on Guitar Hero, and I remember the after my first day, I went home. I had Thai food, and I was just like, I made a mistake in my career. Like, oh no, this is not what I thought gaming was going to be. Like, I thought I was going to do XYZ, but now I'm doing ABC instead. And I really did think that I had made like a grievous error in my career choices. But the reality was that like next day I realized like, you know what, let's try this. Let's do this again. It's day 2. We have extra lives. We can try this. And I realized that like the industry may not be exactly what we had imagined or dreamed it to be, or even the kind of responsibilities that we individually do might not align with what we thought we were going to do as kids. That said, there's so much magic and compassion and fun that happens as a result of people working together and collaborating to make a great game. Was it what I thought it was going to be? No, but it was better. And I think that is a really huge difference between like what I thought was going to be, but what actually surprised me about the game industry is that it might not be what you imagine because you can improve it. And I hope it just keeps getting better.
So when I started working at EA as an intern, I thought that they were going to be like grilling me with questions all the time and have these really abnormally high expectations and want me to work on this thing right away. But instead they were like, all right, here's a bunch of time, a bunch of mentors. There were like people volunteering to be a mentor all the time. And it was just like a lot of education and a lot of expectation for you to grow, right? Which is a much better expectation to have than to just do something at the start. So that was nice.
I'm excited to experience all of that you all mentioned. Yeah, I'm just really looking forward to finally being in that space and, doing what I love.
Yes, absolutely. Doing the thing. Well, awesome. So that was all of our pre-submitted questions. We will be opening up for audience questions now. Renee, do we have any audience questions?
We do, in fact, have an audience question. The first audience question is, I've spent more time working on tabletop PDFs than games this year. Since it's gaming related, is that still good to put on a resume? Everyone nods.
Lots of nods. Yeah, thumbs up. It sounds like that's great.
I think it's an excellent thing to add as like as the reaction years happen. I also want to add that people that you're talking with and maybe sharing them with may not be into tabletop gaming, and they will learn from you as you share that, like the perspectives that may not be known to them. And that way is a very powerful way to like share ideas and approaches to design that are diverse and maybe different to them, but are very powerful in getting to really creative ideas.
Awesome. Great point. I, in fact, have a question. so far in your either study of game development or game development career, what has been the most challenging aspect that you've had to overcome?
Passing engineering interviews. There's a lot of different expectations at many different companies, and they're not all the same. So, and my school didn't prepare me very well for them either. So that was a lot of trial and error.
For me, being burnt out, I think in all of our careers, you do get burnt out no matter what industry that you are working in. But just being very open and transparent with not only your manager, your lead, or your team members, and letting them know, like, hey, this is what's going on. They're usually reasonable people, so they'll work with you about those certain challenges, and making sure that you're at your best self.
I would say it's learning to be vulnerable, open to feedback, and learning to be constructive. I remember when I was working on Skylanders and would watch play tests of kids trying out our games and our characters, and like there was a feeling that was embedded in me when a kid would be playing. They're like completely blank expression, and then the user researcher would ask, "So what did you think?" And the kid would go, "It was okay." And it's like what does that mean? Can we learn more about it? And it's a lot of like sussing out like what does it mean when they have a reaction like that? Can we temper it with something constructive? And personally, there's also feelings like, oh no, I thought I made the most perfect thing in the world. I thought everyone would love it and like it would win a Nobel Prize and all that. But what are the other perspectives? How are people receiving this, and what can I learn from it to make it more fun or more enjoyable for a wider audience? I think that was a really hard lesson for me, but I think it's a human experience that we all grow on.
Yes, absolutely. User testing is just such a space of vulnerability, but it's such an important part of the game design process. So it's one of those, interesting pieces.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, sorry.
I was just saying, absolutely. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna agree. Like that was one of the most challenging things of like at my school there's playtest Thursday, so every Thursday you have to bring in your game, and it's like, oh, I'm sweating. I'm afraid. Like part of me is afraid of what they'll say, but I know that deep down, like this is all necessary because you're creating the game for an audience or for people, right? So it's important to hear feedback. While you may not take everything in, it's also important to know what people are thinking. So that's super, super important, and really does help you grow as a developer or designer.
Absolutely.
Just to add on, Adrian kind of hinted at this. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, but take accountability for your mistakes. It's always super important to learn from your mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. I think we've all made career mistakes. It's actually one of the biggest interview questions that I ask people because I want to hear a human answer. I want to hear your mistakes, your faults. Where are you looking to grow?
Yep, I definitely get that in interviews almost every single time. They're like, yeah, what's a problem and how did you overcome it? We do have another question from the Twitch chat that is, can you use Twitch streaming of development and modeling as a way of portfolio instead of just solely the final product on ArtStation or sneak peeks on Twitter?
So I think this is one of those things that I was talking about earlier, that the industry is evolving. So this wasn't the case in the past, but yes, I can foresee that being a definite solution, primarily because one of the good ways to get noticed is by having your development showcased on social media or on a blog. And talking about those experiences really shows recruiters that, oh, we know exactly what he did because it's all documented. If you just show the finished project, sometimes they're like, I'm not too sure what he did. There's a group of 10 people. It's really hard to like figure out like what's going on here. So yes.
I personally like to say promote yourself, and streaming what you're doing on Twitch and having, quick time videos of you going through the process is a great way to promote yourself as a professional. So even if it doesn't add to necessarily your portfolio or your resume itself, it's going to get people interested in following you as a professional, as an expert of your discipline. And I think that that's a great thing to do, even if a recruiter may or may not look at it.
I think also, just to add on to that, I do have a couple of friends that do Twitch streaming. They'll do a lot of modeling or animation on the spot, but also talking through your stream and what you are doing might help you prepare for an interview.
Absolutely.
Definitely a good technique. Another question from the Twitch chat is, any advice on how to study other games when looking to implement ideas into your own?
Play them.
I think, yes, definitely play them. I would also, just to build on top of that, I would also play games you don't like. So, or maybe don't feel comfortable playing. So, I'm not good at racing games, and I will play them as if the break button doesn't exist, and you can't change my mind otherwise. But it helps me learn, oh, wait, it's more nuanced than just go and cross the finish line. There could be mechanics that they talk about, as in like game mechanics, not mechanics. Well, they might be also mechanic systems that are like you actually fix the car as a mechanic. There may be things like optimization things that are going on the online part of things. Maybe there's some interesting social features that are going on with this game. Maybe there's some interesting control innovations that this game has. And it's easy to not see those if you just for yourself just say, oh, I'm not into racing games. I'm just not going to play them. So it might be a bit of a challenge to start trying games that you don't like, but I think you'll learn the most from them because they're kind of the most counter to your own perceptions.
Adding on to that, I think what's wonderful about playing different games is that the more you experience different kinds of games, the more voices you get to hear that appeal to you. And that can inspire you to create your own work. Like basically what Adrian was saying is that if you just enjoy one genre of media, that's wonderful and that's great. But the more you explore outside of it, the more you're able to design using those lessons that you learn from those different games in order to inform your own games as you move forward.
So I initially interpreted the question from an engineering perspective, which is studying a game is studying the mechanics and how to recreate that mechanic. And if you have the code to a game, sometimes if it's a small game online, developers will be okay with giving you a portion of the code. Learning from that code is a great way to easily like skip ahead a few levels to like figure out, oh, this is what that developer was thinking at that time, and this is how I can recreate it, which is something that I've done many times for my games.
And speaking of recreating things, there was a follow-up question. What do you think about attempting technique challenge in game development to buff the portfolio instead of solely full games or models, like doing the Dead Space 1 tentacle scene, which was one of the most time costly sections that almost postponed the game? I didn't know that. Today I learned.
So this is something I've thought about a lot too when building portfolio, which I call it the prototype versus full game thing. In my opinion, full games are better because turning a prototype into a full game actually isn't that much work. You just have to have some design, you gamify a little bit of portion, and then you add a title screen and a credit screen. So yes, when building a game, I usually like building it around a central core concept, usually a mechanic. And again, this is an engineering perspective. Like I'm going to design an online game, right? And like, what does that entail? And then you work backwards from there. So yeah, I would recommend full games.
As someone who personally likes doing story-heavy games, I've gotten myself in trouble there. I would say even if you can't build a full game, having a full vertical slice so it looks like a full polished game is a really good technique if you're fearful of getting too deep into the weeds of content creation. Cool. So Angel, you were previously talking about Burnout and how going to your managers, your producers to talk about Burnout can help you manage it. What do you have for advice for people who are working on their degree or studying in school and trying to learn game development on the side, or working a day job and trying to work on games on the side, in terms of balancing their life and making sure that they're also not hitting that burnout?
That's a really great question. For me, what works for me is sometimes taking a step back and really looking at either my art or the work that I'm doing, looking at other people's work, getting inspired again. I used to use Game Developers Conference or going to SIGGRAPH or PAX. All those different conferences, every single year I would go and it would re-inspire me, or seeing YouTube channels of people that just I know in the industry, but I don't really know, but they've been in the industry for 20, 30 years. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could, I wish I had your skills one day, hopefully. So yeah, I guess a simple answer, getting re-inspired. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Does anyone else have any advice on how to deal with burnout and work-life balance, particularly when you're working on side projects?
Yes, up to the side projects part. I was gonna say burnout is really something I think about a lot, and one of the skills to develop early on is being able to advocate for yourself. So being able to set boundaries and saying like, okay, I'm not gonna do this anymore. Like that's a great way to motivate yourself also by creating rules. So one rule I've created, for example, is I'm not going to get a new computer until I finish this side project. And that could be a way to motivate yourself without feeling like it's something you have to do. And at work, I would like, okay, today I'm not going to work past this hour, right? I want to get this amount of sleep. So being able to communicate those rules to other people is also important.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
one aspect of working in the game industry is that we're all very passionate about what we do, and that can also function as a challenge for like stopping what we're doing because we love what we're doing. And in many ways, like as much as we like doing and continuing doing and keep programming or working or creating animations or art, there is a human element to this where we should take a break sometimes, and sometimes it's hard to just say, okay, I'm going to step away from this because I'm having so much fun doing what I'm doing, or I'm really invested in what I'm doing. That's kind of a personal challenge, I think, for all of us to kind of just identify where it's like, all right, maybe take a walk, drink some water, make sure that we're kind of a set mind to do it. I think another aspect of this is to also realize that we're not alone in this. If any one of us or on my team, any persons on my team or at my studio are feeling kind of negatively at a certain point, I think it's behooving for me to make sure that they're feeling safe and comfortable, because it's likely that they're not the only ones who might be undergoing through some kind of particular stress. So as it is, I think, an equal balance of like how we can help to taper ourselves and be disciplined in understanding where our own limits are, but also understanding like the empathy and cross relationships of other people, how they feel, and making sure that we can support them as much as they're comfortable, as much as we can, because we are not in it alone in the journey of making great games, and we all stumble through very similar things. And if there's anything this panel has taken away, is that there's a huge common experience of the industry and the people who are part of it, and there's a community and togetherness there that I think is really binding all of us together. So we can all feel certain ways and get stressed at certain aspects or different times, but to know that we can be there for each other is really powerful too.
Empathy is certainly the best soft skill that I have made use of while in the game industry, and it helps connecting with players and with your teammates as well. We're basically at time here, but I'm going to squeeze in one last question if you're okay with it, and that is, when starting to network, what are some tips to give someone who might feel like they don't belong?
That's a great question.
Like, is it social anxiety? Just curious.
Yeah, I would say probably.
Oh, okay. So for me, I do have social anxiety with like large groups of people. Usually I'm more of a quiet one. But I do get myself out there and just try. Sometimes if you're seeing, like, if you're at a big conference or something and someone's alone in a corner, go talk to them, because they probably have the same thing, and you never know who you might meet. I've met plenty of CEOs and like VPs and presidents that are just off in a corner, just drinking or eating alone, and they actually do want to talk and really hear about you, and you can learn about them as well. You will always learn something from someone in life, so be open to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been just such an amazing discussion. I know I learned a lot about creating a career in the gaming industry. So I know that the students, parents, and teachers who are here with us did too. So we greatly appreciate that you dedicated your time and expertise to this event. And we're so happy that you were the last expert presentation of our Game Design Challenge. It's really so great as the students build their portfolios, as they explore how to create games, that they can see how this maybe can one day turn into their career. So we have greatly enjoyed hosting some of the absolute best and brightest minds in the video game industry to assist students with their game design process. As a reminder to everyone who's tuning in, the deadline for submissions is Thursday, April 15th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So we greatly look forward to experiencing all of your submissions, and I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks again.